This is Mehul Mankad, and we're here to talk about decision-making and problem-solving with Cindy Greenlee. Dr. Greenlee, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a clinical psychologist. I work at the Durham VA Medical Center, and I work as part of a team of people called Primary Care Mental Health.
Now, tell us, what is decision-making and problem-solving?
Okay. Problem solving is a term that most of us are generally familiar with,
Right.
and it can be defined as a process for finding solutions to problems or issues.
Now, we all solve problems all day long, right?
We do? Yes, we all have lots of experience with solving problems every single day, from simple minor issues to more complex problems. But it is important to note that problem-solving strategies are helpful when a person has a problem in front of them that has a solution, or for a problem that he or she has the power to change the outcome. Unfortunately, not all of life's problems fall into those categories.
Okay. So there are things that we can fix, and there are things that maybe we can't.
Exactly. So here's a situation or an example of one that does fall into that category that we have some power over.
Okay.
A newly discharged veteran has not yet found employment and is looking for a job. So, as you and I both know, that this can be a very stressful situation to be in. And at the same time, there are ways for a person to incorporate problem-solving strategies to help them to find that job.
So I understand that there are some steps to this process. What are they?
Yes, there are lots of steps. So before a person even gets started on taking action on a problem, there are some important things that he or she should do. The first recommendation for problem solving is really having a good understanding of the problem. This may sound simple, but sometimes this can be hard to tease apart. So thinking of that newly discharged veteran who is looking for a job, there might be multiple reasons why a person is having a hard time looking for a job. Can you think of any reasons?
I can think of some. So how about maybe she's not familiar with writing a civilian resume. Maybe she doesn't know how to translate her military occupational specialty or rating into a civilian job description. Or maybe she's nervous about applying for a job in the private sector. How are those?
Exactly. Those are great because those are all possible reasons that a person might be having a hard time looking for a job.
Okay.
So for the veteran who is unfamiliar with resume writing, problem-solving strategies really need to be tailored to that specific problem. You would then focus in on how do you get someone familiar with writing a resume? How do you find that information for them or help them to find information on the relevant components of resume writing? And how do they make all of those relevant components into one coherent document? But from the other example that you gave of a person who's nervous, who is actually noticing that anxiety is getting in the way, your problem-solving strategies will be very different. Your problem-solving strategies might be to help that person to get mental health treatment for the anxiety, for the nervousness, because that's the barrier. That's what's stopping them from actually moving forward.
Now, once the problem itself is clearly defined and you and the client know what the problem is, it sounds like the next step is for them to get interested in solving the problem in the present.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are lots of reasons why a person may not want to solve the problem right now. One reason is that she may not think it's that big of a deal. She might not realize that it's something that is pretty significant. She might think, this is going to blow over. I'll just leave it alone. It'll pass.
Or it might solve itself.
It might
A
solve
job will
itself.
magically appear.
Exactly. So if you're working with a veteran like that who isn't really that concerned, but you're really concerned for them because you care about them, that you
Right.
want them to do well, your role might be to help them to realize the significance of not taking action on this problem. So another reason why she may not be interested in solving the problem right now is that she might not even think that she'll be able to do it. She might not have the confidence in herself to actually think that she'll be able to solve the problem. An example of that is, so this veteran is looking for a job, is out of work and recently discharged. Maybe she's heard a lot of stories. Maybe she's watched news stories on how difficult it is for newly discharged veterans to find employment. Maybe she has Army buddies that were discharged a year before her
Right.
and are still out of work. So if you think about those things, Of course, someone might be discouraged if they're looking for a job under those circumstances. So your role is different than the anxiety. It's really focusing in on potentially helping that veteran to see that you're acknowledging the challenges that she or her buddies might be facing, but it's also important to highlight possible outcomes and possible solutions rather than thinking that her buddies' experiences are guaranteed to be hers.
All right, so let's say the veteran is ready to kind of move forward and overcome this initial sense of indecision. What next?
A next step that can be really helpful is prioritizing. Prioritizing encourages a person to actually list all problems or all components of a problem, then rearrange them from most important to least important.
Okay.
Once the problems have been prioritized, a person should then tackle them one at a time in the order of importance. So whatever is most important first, do that first, and then work your way down the list.
Break it down. Okay.
Prioritizing is interesting because it really focuses in on focusing in on one problem at a time. Prioritizing is very different than multitasking. Multitasking is a buzzword. It sounds really good. We all know that it sounds good, but it can really be difficult to multitask if you're stressed out. If you're trying to tackle all of these problems at the same time, multitasking may actually increase your stress level. It actually can also make you less efficient as well. I always like to give the example of thinking of your brain like a car manufacturing plant.
Sure.
If you think about a factory traditionally, factories are designed to have workers focus in on one or very few tasks, learn how to do that task well, and then eventually move on to something else. So thinking of a worker at a car manufacturing factory, they might say, you learn how to work brakes. You learn how to install brakes, and that worker, if they focus in only on installing brakes, they get faster and more efficient at installing brakes.
Practice makes perfect.
Practice makes perfect.
Okay.
Exactly. But if you were to take that same worker who has great experience and practice working on brakes and say, now you're gonna not only install brakes, but you're actually gonna paint the car too.
Right.
That changes it up a little bit.
Right.
And you'll actually see for that specific worker that their efficiency goes way down.
And then the product is not going to be as good probably. Either the brakes or the paint job is going to be kind of bad.
Exactly. That, if you think about our skill level, most times we need practice with lots of things in order to get skill that way. So if we think about our brains in the same manner, that is better for our own energy and our sake and our stress levels, for us to focus in on one problem at a time, get that completed, and then move in on solving something else.
So the person has identified the most important thing. What happens next?
Okay, the next step is setting a goal for the outcome of the problem. For some problems, setting a goal may be pretty straightforward, but for other problems like long-term goals, thinking about things like weight management or financial security or paying down debt, it's really helpful to set a goal and define what you want that outcome to be.
Okay.
A helpful strategy of thinking about goals is to use the acronym SMART. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based.
All right.
So how about we go through each one of those letters one by one?
Break it down for us.
I will. So the S stands for specific. Making a goal more specific means really drilling down to what the veteran wants as an end result. For example, the general goal of, I want to have less debt, can be made in a helpful way more specific. You can change it to, I actually want to pay off my credit card.
Okay, so you're taking something huge, and I'm going to give myself a goal while we go along.
Yes.
All of the closets in my house are a disaster. Okay? And I'm going to make it into, I need to work on my master bedroom.
Yes, that makes it more specific for you and for your goal generally, that you have an opportunity to wrap your head around that a little bit easier.
Okay.
The M is for measurable, which means that a person needs a way to measure the outcome, measure and monitor what they are trying to do. Using the example of paying off credit card debt,
Right.
a person can use money as their measurement. If in 2 months she has $50 less in debt, she knows she's well on her way towards her goal.
Got it. All right. Now my example, if I can find what I need in the closet where I know it is, that's my measure.
That's a good one, especially with closets. It saves you some time in the morning, I'm sure.
Right.
Okay, so the A.
A.
The A stands for attainable. Attainable means creating a goal that's achievable. So lots of people, sometimes myself included, lots of people set very lofty goals.
Okay.
Things that are having extremely high expectations for what you want to see happen. Not only what you want to see happen, but how quickly you want it to happen. It's really important for goals that we set something that's achievable or attainable, because sometimes we can get discouraged before we even get started. Or we might make a little bit of progress, but because we created this big goal, we're not going to be able to do it in the time limit that we set out for ourselves. So using the example of paying off credit card debt, if a person has $5,000 of debt, it probably would not be attainable to set the goal of paying it off in 1 month.
Right. Okay. And then in my example, it would literally take me the entire weekend to clean out the master bedroom closet. But if I stretched it out and said I'm going to do like 1 shelf a day, that might be better.
Exactly, because then you won't get discouraged and you can see your little bit of progress, and it's actually helping you along the way to reach your eventual goal.
Okay.
Okay, so now moving on to the R. The R stands for relevant, meaning that your goal addresses the problem. Sounds simple again, but thinking of debt, if your goal is to pay down debt and to pay off the credit card, your goal should really focus in on that, and your actual list of things that you need to do should always focus on paying off the debt.
Okay. So if I just go in the master bedroom closet and say I'm going to clean it up, but I don't actually do anything,
Right.
then I'm just rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic.
Exactly.
Okay.
And lastly, the T of SMART stands for time-based, meaning that there's a deadline for this goal. Deadlines or time limits can be so important for all of us. But unfortunately, when most of us are working on our own personal goals, we don't really give ourselves time limits. We kind of say, yeah, I want to do this, but we don't really add, yes, I'm going to do this by the end of the week. So setting that time limit really gives a goal so much more structure. It helps us to keep time in the picture, and it makes us more accountable to if we're actually working towards our goal, if we're actually going to get there.
What if somebody kind of wrote this down and then maybe took it a step further and made it electronic and gave themselves like smartphone reminders or things like that? Does that make sense?
That's an awesome idea, that it would be really helpful for you to, if you're a paper and pencil kind of girl, that you write it down, that you have it somewhere where you'll see it. If you're thinking about your closet, put it on your closet door.
Okay.
And make sure that you can put a check mark by it. If you're a fancy person and you have a smartphone that works well, then you can actually set reminders for yourself, or you can say, okay, what's the next step? What do I need to do next? And by Saturday, have I met that goal? So, in summary, the SMART goal with all of those key components, changing that really general goal of I want to have less debt becomes smarter, and then it becomes over the next 6 months, I will pay down my credit card balance by $50 a month.
That sounds great. We have our goal.
Yes.
It's clearly defined.
Yep.
What happens next?
Okay. So the next step is to list possible solutions.
Okay.
This can be a brainstorming event where all ideas are laid out and the pros and cons of each idea are weighed.
So that may be good to do on paper as well.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So you can keep track of it and you can cross things out if they seem like they're just not really
Crazy.
feasible.
Yeah.
Crazy. So a veteran can do brainstorming by himself. However, if a person has been thinking about a problem for a long time, they may only generate a couple of different possible outcomes or possible solutions to the problem. So it actually can be more helpful if you can contribute to that as well, if you're assisting that veteran. I've often asked a veteran, what do you think are some solutions to this problem?
Yeah.
And they might name a couple, but they're not thinking necessarily always of the things that I'm thinking about. So if I'm able to contribute along with their ideas, it provides more of a breadth of opportunities, of options to the possible problem.
Sounds good.
Okay? So, with all of the options on the table, the veteran can then decide for himself which one he would prefer to try. And once one solution has been identified as being the preferred way to go, the veteran can then create an action plan for that solution. The action plan should include a clearly defined SMART goal. We went through what SMART meant earlier, and it should also include some other key components. One is a description of the resources that he will need to achieve that goal. Next, the action plan should include the list of steps that need to be taken in order. So step 1, step 2, step 3. Using the example that I gave earlier of paying off credit card debt, step 1 could be, I will gather all of my credit card statements. Might sound simple, but depending on how you organize yourself, it might take a little bit of time.
Okay.
So step 2 would then be, I will figure out which card has the highest interest rate. And thankfully, they're required to put that somewhere on your statement.
Okay.
The next step, step 3, will be, I will determine how much above the minimum payment I can afford to pay each month on the card with the highest interest rate.
Okay.
Okay, so those steps are clearly laid out.
I'm going to make my own steps for my closet.
Okay.
Got it.
Sounds like a plan. Next, the action plan needs to include a way to monitor progress. And this is especially important for long-term goals. The action plan should also build in some troubleshooting of potential barriers.
Okay.
So troubleshooting really includes focusing in on brainstorming possible things that might come up along the way, but then also doing a little bit of problem solving about those things that might come up. So if we're thinking of that same example about paying off credit card bills, are there any big expenses coming down the road?
Right.
Do you have a major car repair that you know that you need to do in a couple of months? Are you planning a summer holiday with your family? Because those things are possibly going to steer you off course if you don't plan ahead for them. So it's important to think of how you can still stay on track with your SMART goal despite these events coming down the road.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so another helpful piece of the action plan is coming up with rewards to keep yourself motivated.
Okay.
So we already established that this is our own personal goal, but it's funny how we work sometimes. Sometimes we can feel like we're torturing ourselves working on our own goals, thinking about something like weight management or even financial stability or security or having extra money. Those are things that, lots of people want, but in the process, it can feel like, oh, am I ever gonna get there?
Like a huge chore.
Exactly. So rewards can be really helpful to keep you motivated. So if you're thinking about paying off a credit card over a year, thinking about maybe every month, you have a little bit of a reward in place for yourself where you're saying, you know what? I'm doing this for me.
Okay.
And it helps to keep you motivated going forward. So the next month you can say, I'm looking forward to that little reward at the end of the month.
Got it. But you tie it to the goal.
Exactly.
Okay.
And last, but definitely not least, having some protected time to work on a goal is probably the most important piece of the plan. By protected time, I mean time that a person sets aside, away from everything else, to actually sit down and think about and plan for their goal. It's important to think about it as a way to track progress. You can also think about it as a way to reformulate or retool your goal if you need to. It's really hard if we think about planning and goals to think about how am I going to get this done if you don't have the time in place to do it. So having the credit card example, maybe a person could set aside an hour every week to say, during that time, I'm going to look at my budget, I'm going to think about if I'm any closer to my goal, and I'm going to reformulate things.
It sounds like this is another place where a calendar or schedule or maybe a smartphone reminder could be helpful to motivate you to actually do it at that time.
That's a great idea because things get busy.
Right.
We all have lots of busy things or busy lives or things pulling us in different directions.
Yeah.
So for me, I would think that Sunday afternoon is a time where I can do a little bit of planning. So I would always encourage someone to have that protected time at a time in the week where they know that the least amount of distractions might be present.
Okay. Instead of just clicking next episode on some sort of streaming
Right.
TV show.
Right, and like you recommended, having an alarm go off that reminds you of that. Because on Sunday afternoon, I might not be thinking about it,
Right.
but if that alarm goes off, it automatically makes me say, that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
We've identified the problem.
Yes.
We made our SMART goal.
Yep.
Created our action plan.
Yes.
All this stuff is awesome. Now, you mentioned earlier that these problem-solving strategies really can't be used for everything. Could you talk a little bit about an example where maybe we cannot use this approach?
Right. So problem-solving strategies are great. I recommend that lots of us use them for lots of situations. However, they're not helpful when a person is faced with a problem that he or she does not have the power to change the outcome. So, for example, say a person recently experienced the death of a loved one. As we know, that can be very difficult, and as we also know that either we've already faced that at one point in time in our lives, or we're gonna face that at some point in time in our lives. But unlike the previous examples of looking for a job, or paying off credit card debt, or even organizing your closet, this is different. That there is not a way for this person in that situation to actually solve the problem in the same way. They don't have the power to change the outcome. Which is important to think about, because sometimes we try to apply problem solving to issues that we can't really solve that problem in that way. So for someone like this, or in a situation like this, I would instead recommend coping skills, which can be more helpful than problem solving. And that can include things like self-care, distraction, benefit finding, or utilizing social support. A person might feel more relief with those things than they would if they keep trying to problem solve in the same ways.
I see. So it's really knowing when to apply which tool.
Exactly.
Well, Cindy, this was very helpful to me, to my closet, and I hope to our veteran service officers, and I hope that they'll be able to use this not only in their own lives, but to help their veteran clients.
Great, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining.
Sure.